Legal experts said that several of the specific allegations by Mr. Cohen could be relevant in the investigations into the 2016 campaign. Washington, the dramatic public testimony to Congress on Wednesday morning by President Trump's former lawyer, Michael D. Cohen, could intensify the legal issues facing the president in the criminal and civil investigations that are swirling around him, legal experts said. Mr. Cohen's testimony before the House Judiciary Committee was a remarkable personal and political rebuke to the president from a lawyer who served Mr. Trump with fierce loyalty for more than a decade. In his prepared testimony, Mr. Cohen, who has pleaded guilty to lying to Congress and will go to prison for his crimes, blasted the president as a racist, a con man, and a cheat. But legal experts said that several of the specific allegations by Mr. Cohen in his opening statement could be relevant to questions about whether Mr. Trump participated in a conspiracy to affect the 2016 election, violated campaign finance laws and obstructed justice in an effort to deflect investigations. The experts cautioned that nothing Mr. Cohen said in his prepared remarks dramatically altered what is known about any legal case against the president. The relevant laws are complex and the president's lawyers have repeatedly argued that he did not violate them. And perhaps most important, they note, there is a Justice Department policy that asserts that a president may not be indicted while in office. Still, Mr. Cohen's testimony surfaced some new information that could be relevant to Robert S. Mueller, the special counsel, or other prosecutors investigating cases touching on the president. Here are some examples. In his prepared remarks, Mr. Cohen described in detail how Mr. Trump personally reimbursed Mr. Cohen for the $130,000 hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, the adult film actress whose legal name is Stephanie Clifford, to ensure her silence about an affair with Mr. Trump. In February 2017, 1 month into his presidency, I'm visiting President Trump in the Oval Office for the first time, Mr. Cohen said. It's truly awe-inspiring, he's showing me around and pointing to different paintings, and he says to me something to the effect of "Don't worry, Michael, your January and February reimbursement checks are coming. They were FedExed from New York and it takes a while for that to get through the White House system." Richard L. Hasen, an election law professor at the University of California at Irvine School of Law, said prosecutors could use Mr. Cohen's description of the payments from Mr. Trump to bolster a charge of campaign finance violations. To the extent that these were illegal campaign finance contributions, which were reimbursed and not reported, here is more evidence that Trump was conspiring to violate campaign finance laws as president, Mr. Hasen said. He noted, however, that campaign finance laws, which are complex, require proof that a person was willfully violating the laws. Mr. Cohen's testimony does not prove that Mr. Trump knew that the payments he was making were illegal, something that prosecutors would have to prove if they wanted to charge the president. In his testimony, Mr. Cohen described a moment when he said Roger Stone, one of Mr. Trump's top political operatives, called the president to tell him about a conversation with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. "I was in Mr. Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone. Mr. Trump put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone," Mr. Cohen said. Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that, within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Cohen added, Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect of "Wouldn't that be great?" Legal experts cautioned that just proving that Mr. Trump knew about the WikiLeaks plans to leak damaging documents ahead of time would not necessarily prove that the president or his campaign were guilty of conspiracy. Prosecutors would have to prove that Mr. Trump and the campaign actively engaged in coordinating with Russians to distribute the documents or took other actions to affect the outcome of the election. The question of contacts between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign is central to the issue of whether there was any conspiracy between the campaign and Russia. It is not known what Mr. Trump might have told Mr. Mueller's team about what, if anything, he knew about WikiLeaks plans or about contacts between Mr. Stone and Mr. Assange. Peter Zeidenberg, a former federal prosecutor, said that if Mr. Cohen is telling the truth, and if Mr. Trump claimed to Mr. Mueller in his sworn, written testimony that he was not aware of any contacts between Mr. Stone and Mr. Assange, that could be a crime. When you lie in that context, it's not only perjury but it's obstruction of justice too, Mr. Zeidenberg said. Mr. Cohen's testimony about Mr. Stone's conversation with Mr. Trump could also open the president up to further campaign finance violations, Mr. Hasan said. Federal law bars campaigns from taking anything of value from foreign entities. The conversation with Mr. Stone could be used to help prove that Mr. Trump and his campaign knowingly accepted valuable help from WikiLeaks in his efforts to defeat Hillary Clinton during the 2016 presidential campaign. If it's true that Stone was directly in communication with Assange while also communicating with Trump and the Trump campaign, there's the potential for a violation of the campaign finance laws involving foreign contributions, Mr. Hasan said.